We have a packed agenda, so let's go ahead and jump in. Thank you everyone so much for joining us. This issue is so important to CTAA and our members, of course. And so we really want to walk away today with actionable solutions. I think everyone on the call can agree that this is a really important issue and something that is affecting communities across the country. And so today we want to walk away with what can we do and how can we fix this issue. A couple background and pieces before we turn it over to Scott. This is being recorded and this is in webinar format. Just because it's in webinar format doesn't mean we don't want it to be interactive. We did that just for the capacity reasons. So at any point in time, if you feel like you want to add a comment, share what's going on with you, what kind of challenges you're experiencing, please just throw me a chat or put it in the Q&A that you'd like to speak, and I would be happy to unmute you. And that's for any time throughout this call. We really want it to be an interactive meeting, not just us talking at you in any kind of way. Additionally, along with this recording, Scott and I will be meeting after to develop a series of resources that we can share with Congress and the FTA and other stakeholders with actionable solutions, like I mentioned earlier, and with really efficient messaging. So you'll get those first, along with this recording. So we want to make sure that everyone's really on the same page and we have a cohesive message moving forward. So thank you everyone for being here again. And with that, I will turn it over to Scott.
Well, hello, good afternoon and good morning to our members in the West Coast who are joining us. Thank you for giving us some of your valuable time. And, obviously this is a critical issue. I've been going to a number of state transit conferences over the last month and meeting with a lot of our members, and consistently this issue is the one that is at the top of everyone's minds. And I wanted to, at the kind of outset of this session, before we bring some experts with some quick ideas, I wanted to talk through kind of just the lay of the land, or kind of the environment we're working in. And I don't need to tell you all that there's a labor shortage. It's significant, and it's everywhere, from the biggest urban operators to the smallest rurals, to NEMT, to the TNCs. Everyone is facing this that's moving people. And it really, I recall that I had a meeting with the American Trucking Association in like 2018, in that world before the pandemic. And they were looking at the average age of truck drivers. And it had gone up almost 20 years in the last decade, the average age. And their takeaways were that no young people wanted to drive trucks. And they had grave concerns about how they were going to kind of bridge the period between where they are now and where automation may come and be more universally adopted. And at the same time, I was hearing from CTAA members who kind of characterized their operator and driver hiring practices. A member of ours in Texas told me, Scott, I'm hiring people today that I would not have looked at 10, 15, 20 years ago. This is again pre-pandemic. So we were seeing the beginnings of this crisis kind of before COVID arrived, and it really just exacerbated this issue. We have to admit there's competition like we've never seen before for drivers. And Julie and I were talking here earlier. If you were on, you may have heard us. The delivery industry and the proliferation of the delivery industry in the midst of the pandemic has created competition from UPS and FedEx and Amazon. And, we all see so many more of those vehicles out there. And frankly, I had some meetings yesterday that's also creating a lot of challenges in the supply chain of vehicles. That's another issue that we're not going to address today. And then I think, look, let's be honest. The pandemic has made, I think, previous environments that we tapped for workforce that were recently retired individuals have said, I'm not going to do that. I'll be retired. it's made that kind of decision making. We've surveyed our members. If you go to CTAA.org, you can look at the survey. Many of you are concerned, rightfully so, about how to implement vaccination policies and what that would do to your already dwindling driver pools. So, all of these issues have kind of come together in a negative way and crafted an environment where every day I hear from members that they're cutting service because they don't have enough drivers. They're largely cutting weekend and evening service first. And just the general notion of pullout is very difficult. We have a board member at CTAA, Mike Whitten, who up in Manchester, New Hampshire, runs the Manchester Transit Authority. And also, because he's a true transit geek, does all of the school buses for the city of Manchester out of the same operating environment. Mike told me at our board meeting 2 weeks ago, every morning he drives a school bus, then comes back and is the transit manager. And I think that's really indicative of what we're seeing. Let's talk about a couple other quick issues before I turn it over. The CDL issue is making this harder. And we were grateful that we were able to fight off attempts in both the INVEST Act and through an amendment process in the Senate and what led to the current infrastructure bill, concepts that would have changed the threshold down to 8 passengers needing a CDL nationally. That would have made this current problem a lot worse. There's also some changes with CDL policy that if you're not aware, you need to be aware. February 7th in 2022, and basically a significant change to CDL training will go live and need to be implemented by all of you. Whereas when you're onboarding a new driver, which we hope you're going to be doing a lot of, and you need to get that person kind of their first CDL, there is a significant amount of new kind of training at that entry level that's going to need to be done. Chris Zeilinger on our staff is on top of that issue. We're going to be putting together a one-pager on that and we'll go out to all of our members. But it's going to require in-house training, and it's going to require a lot more classroom time and really create the two things that we don't need right now, a greater expense and a longer time process to onboard new CDL drivers. So what has CTA been doing? Besides hearing from our members and trying to act, and you'll hear about some of the things we've been doing from members in Pennsylvania and Iowa, and Karen Souza, our training and certification director. In addition to all that, we've been looking at, are there ways to adjust reimbursement rates for volunteer drivers? I was up in Duluth, Minnesota, meeting with our Wisconsin and Minnesota members earlier this week. Heard that really loud and clear as an issue they'd like to see us address. Julia, who'll be talking, and I met and had a town hall, and I'll share the link when I get the link from the National Association of Workforce Boards. And another board member of CTA is Robert Hyatt, really clued us in and got us connected with, can workforce development leads locally help you pay for CDL training and career-based training? We've also got, and we can't ignore, that we've had a lot of money through the varying COVID-19 stimulus programs, CARES Act, CRISA, and the American Rescue Plan arrive, that is operational in nature and is allowable. If you look at question, going to get very technical here, CE 14 of the FAQs on FTA's website, it's very clear that you're allowed to use these funds to honor pay drivers. And I want to urge that because, one, it's allowable, and two, it's a lot less expensive to keep current drivers happy than to find new ones. And in this environment, it's a lot harder. So, there's a lot of factors that we want to remind you of right now. And I'm going to turn it back to Taylor to introduce the other speakers. And then I'll come back on the back end and let's talk through. I want to hear your solutions, ideas you have. What are legislative or regulatory fixes that you think we ought to be promoting right now? Because it's not enough to say, okay, this is a problem. All 70 of us on this call know it's a problem. We've got to now, and CTA's kind of MO is alongside a problem, we like to have a solution. And we like to have that coming from you, derived from our members. So this is a chance to create that. So Taylor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Scott. Karen is up next. Karen is CTA's Human Resources Director and Training and Certification Director. Definitely our guru in this topic. So Karen, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Taylor. In looking at this topic, as I have for many years, and talking to members, Josh Baker and I have presented on this ourselves throughout the years at Expo and at other times. I thought it was fundamental that if you have attended other meetings or this is your first time, that I bring forward what I call the top 10 list to go about sourcing and recruiting drivers. That really I know whether someone is large enough and is fortunate to have a human resource department or person, or whether you're so small that you're on this call and you have one person wearing many hats and it's in this arena as well. Focusing on these top 10 things also means something that I can say in my decades of being a human resource director, both in the private sector and now. I will call out myself and others that some of these things mean we have to look at our processes differently, that we cannot continue operating in the same way in terms of supporting the goals that are critical. And number one, we know is hiring of drivers. So please keep that in mind as we're saying, if you've done it before, there's a lot that's changed during the pandemic that we have to consider again. So first, we all know fundamentally something that's very obvious, which to be competitive and trying to hire drivers is the starting salary has to be something that you recognize in your community and based on others in similar fields and work who have come to work for you or currently are promoting, that has to be competitive for the market. So the other part that Scott mentioned that's critical is for new people coming in and in increasing salaries, if that's what you determined you have to do, what is that impact on the long-term staff, drivers you've had working for us? And in focusing on that, we have to make sure that there isn't what we call pay compression, where we're bringing new people in at a rate that's just above, not by much, or even equal to what long-term staff are being paid now. So it's two parts that we have to evaluate and be critical about. What do I need to do to be competitive? After all, a couple of months ago, when the national chain called 7-Eleven said we're hiring at $13 an hour, and that's to serve something, and ring it up at a cash register, many people would say, my market, I have to be at that or more. And some of you are in smaller communities where not the case. But that critical analysis and also looking at the pay of your current staff so that you're not so close to them that they also say, why am I here when I'm being paid and I've been here a long time, almost what everybody else is who's coming in. So that's the first one. The second one is when you're listing your job openings, whether on your website, I'm always saying use social media and use Indeed.com, who's the #1 aggregator of all jobs in the world, but certainly when it comes to transit, and my research has shown, that's where drivers are looking for positions. It's not knowing your website or knowing to go there, but they're going to Indeed. So use the term driver is what I've heard when I've talked to the Indeed senior leaders. When they look at the data and the flow of data to transit openings, they're saying that's a critical term. Don't use terms that are inside that are known only in transit, fixed route, paratransit, ADA, or the term operator. The general public understands the word driver, and what your ad will show is something more about that. But please remember that's very essential when it comes to connecting to the greater universe of who we're trying to have look at openings. The next one that's also critical is promoting your openings, not only in what you consider an obvious spot on your website, but have you thought about a separate web page that is for drivers only? And on that separate web page, what you want to feature front and forward about your agency and the openings and opportunities is something that connects to what we call a very short application. A short application, I know, means that some of you work for agencies or city governments and so forth, where there's a long application that needs to be completed, and it must be completed if you're going to be hiring someone. But initially, when someone is applying to you, you'll hear from some of our other speakers. I know Julia will bring up something about this, where a very short application is something where we have learned from research and talking with, again, Indeed and other aggregators of jobs that do job boards, that anything more than 3 minutes, the person will leave the application and they will never, the data shows, never come back to look at that application again. That's pretty brutal, but that's what it's like. So a short application, less than 3 minutes to complete. Is this accessible by using what 80% of drivers data shows in transit are using to look for jobs, which is their cell phones? So if you're fortunate to have a marketing department, or you are working with whomever outside your organization that creates these things, it has to be easily accessible and understood on that capability as much as your website and other ways that you're promoting your job. An employee referral program really should be what 100% of all of us have. And an employee referral program, typically your feedback is someone completes probation successfully. At that point, there is money given to the person who referred the person who was hired. Some of your peers also decided to also reward the person who stayed and made it through probation at this time, as much as the person who referred them. So consider expanding your program. When's the last time you looked at how much is given for the employee referral? And so would you feel that it's time to look at boosting that up as well, even when you already have an active program? The next one on the list, make sure that when you're posting your jobs that we remember something critical that we have also learned. We're hearing a lot more, all of us, that's being promoted in articles, what we're hearing from fellow peers and transit agencies, that a key part of outreach does mean that your social media accounts, again, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever you use, hopefully it's at least one of those, as much as with Indeed.com, that people are not looking for the traditional way jobs may have been described by you in the past. So, do you only have one ad that looks one way that all the time promotes your jobs? Are you reaching out to a variety of audiences in your community where you can have multiple ways that your job is being promoted and marketed? Easy example. I've talked to many of you who are in communities where you have a strong Spanish speaking community. And when's the last time do you have a driver who speaks Spanish? That driver looked at your ad and says, that's not how people are looking for ads now, or that's not the words that matter to people now. And so are you getting feedback authentically today from your drivers on your ads and how they read? And do they feel people would be responding to it? Are you engaging your drivers in this process to tell you how this is being seen and looked by the greater community that's looking to apply for you for drivers? You can have and should have, is what I'm encouraging you to do, to have multiple ads that are reflecting your agency and having it go to different markets. Don't stay just with one like we used to in the old days. Are you advertising your jobs inside your vehicle, outside your vehicle? When you're putting it inside your vehicle, do you have an application there right now? So if somebody said to your driver, I just read this, where do I get that application? Instead of saying it's on our website, do you actually have something there that they could also hand to someone? When it's outside your vehicles, is your ad showing an email address to email if someone wants to know more about openings? Is there something there that connects to your website? All these things you think we would always be doing, sometimes these things get missed over time. So how is someone supposed to apply to you when they're seeing something inside or outside that's on your vehicle? The next thing, let's talk about something critical when it comes to hiring your drivers. Setting up an interview process to reply to any applicant. We don't want to lose anyone. We all know that. It's really critical right now. So on the same day, do you text, email, or phone and leave a message if you don't reach them person to person? Do you have people identified throughout every single day, especially if you're small and you don't have anybody in HR to do this work? But are there people that know from 10 to 2, I'm the one who's going to be texting, phoning, or emailing someone who applied to something, immediately saying, hi, thanks for applying to us. We're interested in interviewing you. We're available at this time, or when are you available? You know, something brief and quick that you can have prepackaged that gets fired off when you have someone applying in any capability. Who's actively doing that kind of work, no matter how small, or if you're fortunate enough to have a department like that? So there you are. You have your interview process set up. You're immediately replying when you have, nobody wants to lose anyone. And yet the key thing is creating a realistic job preview video. I'm a big fan of that can be on your webpage where you have your application sitting. If you create the driver webpage that not only features the application, the benefits, but authentically having a video. You can take your mobile phone and use a video. It doesn't have to be Hollywood glamour level. And have one of your drivers saying, you know, yes, this has been a challenging time, but what I like is I'm still helping people get where they want to go. You know, just something authentically where you can ask questions, the driver answers, and it's being honest. Sure, it's not always easy, but what I like is X or Y. So you want to have a video being shown in a way that someone can see it with your Indeed.com listing. Wow, Karen, you keep bringing up Indeed, but that's the #1 aggregator of transit jobs that people are looking for today. And it's all part of what's side by side with the words. The other thing that might surprise some of you is I've been asked Indeed, what are the top jobs that people are hovering over at what agencies, and what are they seeing in those job ads? And what they're seeing is something different than you might traditionally have in your ads. And in this specific example, I'll say this. Many of the ads that are being looked at and open now are not saying this is the driver's job, this is their responsibility, and this is what they're doing, which I think most of us don't list our jobs that way anymore. But essentially what they're saying is, in our work culture, we believe in teamwork. We support each other. They're not getting into the details of the job because you can link to the website and read more. You can link to that application and see more about applying, but they're describing the culture and the environment, because many people have told me the competitive nature of jobs that are being funded, that are getting drivers to work in other capacities, FedEx and UPS, and a lot of stealing of drivers and people waiting outside the gate when their drivers are driving out and trying to, almost jump them then and get them, which I've heard more than once. The key thing I've been saying is that I think it's so essential that you're describing the culture and the atmosphere and about that ability for flexible hours that's meant to be a plus. And these work-life benefits are really critical, because that's what most people are looking at right now. And we've been hearing it all along. And you have that capability. It's how we let people see it and know it, that it's authentic and real. Last but not least, just to summarize the top 10 here, is a job fair. How many of you have held your own job fair? Not attended others, but held your own. A job fair where, whether it's in person or really critically, here we are on Zoom. It's the perfect way to hold your own job fair. On Zoom, you have chat rooms. So you can have a team of different managers or different leaders in your organization that you prepare them. These are the top 3 questions we're asking everyone. Here's where we go into a chat room to do a more in-depth discussion with some people we're really interested in and accelerate the process. If you're doing an in-person job fair, make sure your hours are the hours for the shifts and times you're trying to hire for, where you're more likely to get people to apply for those openings. And so I encourage you're creating your own job fair, having your drivers with you. They are there to answer questions. They're the face of your organization. Having your clean vehicles that are by your front door when people are walking in and looking around and they're excited and you want them to be excited and you're trying to hire the right attitude people. We know we can't train attitude. The attitudes you want in drivers and how that's reflected in a job fair, whether in person or you're doing it through Zoom chats, connects with that authentic, realistic video that I mentioned earlier and all of that. So that's our top 10, and you can learn more about it and see more about it as you look at our blog page and other ways as well. Thanks very much, and I'll turn that back over to you, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Karen. And everyone make sure to check out the chat. I linked Karen's blog post that she had previously written on the top 10, as well as her amazing training that I know a lot of our members have taken advantage of. Next, we're going to turn it over to Josh. Josh Baker runs Amtran. It's a small urban system up in Altoona, Pennsylvania. So Josh, it's all you.
All right, thank you, Taylor. Taylor was a little too kind there. I don't run Amtran. I'm technically, I think my boss, Eric Wolf, who Scott knows very well, would probably take some issue with that. But I'm our deputy CEO, and one of the major responsibilities I have here at Amtran is to be kind of the gatekeeper of our culture that's been built up over many, many decades. So this is a major issue, as Scott mentioned, and as Karen had mentioned, and Taylor there in the opening. Know one thing, you're not alone. All right. Everyone's going through this. Multiple industries are going through this nationwide. Rely on each other, rely on services at CTAA and other associations that provide you. This comes down for me to planning and culture. And I'll get into some of the things that Amtran has done to some degree to success that Karen's already mentioned. But to talk about the planning process, we at Amtran, even being a small urban, we have less than 50 people totally on staff and right around 10 admin folks. We have invested in planning at all levels for a very, very long time, many decades. It's actually the main reason why I'm actually at Amtran. So, that comes down to some of the things that Karen's even talked about, the wage analysis, getting creative with your benefit packages. Scott had mentioned some of the ways to spend that stimulus money that's appropriate. We did not provide any benefits to part-time drivers, and that's exactly how every driver has to come into Amtran is part-time. So we started to look at over the past couple of years of enhancing a benefit package for part-time folks, making us more attractive. Our wage is good in our area, but how do we keep those folks until they get to the full-time status where they can enjoy the variety of benefits that our staff have here? And part of that is reviewing our background check process. I take great pride in holding that gatekeeping role here at Amtran, but it also can be it can hold up the process. Where our frontline managers, our director of transportation, our director of maintenance, they need someone in the seat or someone to fix the bus as fast as possible. We want the right person that's in the seat or fixing the bus. So culture is the major thing that's important to us, but we don't want to let our recruitment or hiring process slow that down for quality people that are coming through that pipeline. So we've had to look at how can we adjust, the A, B, C, D in our process. Do we jump later in the process earlier to move it along more efficiently and effectively for people? Because just like all the delays we're experiencing in groceries and Amazon, we're also experiencing those delays in the hiring process when you're doing background checks. They seem to be taking longer for fingerprinting and for child abuse clearances, things like that. So how can we be expeditious in that process? So just be fluid. That was something hard for me to adjust to, but we've had to do that to keep quality candidates in the pipeline. Another thing is about your recruitment material is understand that in today's recruitment age, we're dealing with multiple generations of prospective staff. We get 5 generations of individuals working in our agencies at one time. So the same ad can be repeated differently, will be heard differently by all those different generations. Karen had mentioned, using multiple ads to tell the same story. I think that's a great way to do it. So for me, the planning process is to look at all those things. And sometimes it's hard when you're in the moment of it and you're kind of in damage control or crisis mode, but someone needs to take a breath and try to make sure that you are planning for now and planning for later. And looking at all those recruitment tools and your succession planning, things like that, that will make your process and changing your process a little easier. It has for us at Amtran. The second thing, again, the most important thing to us here at Amtran is culture. And Karen touched on a little bit of these, and I know Julia will too, is that when you're telling the story, let your people tell the story. talk about your organization, about the quality of work that you do. We just recently had a training from our transit attorney, came in and talked to our staff. And the main feedback we heard from her was, your drivers want your community to know more about what we do. And we thought to ourselves, okay, I mean, that's an unbelievable request that we need to honor. And so not only are we doing that, we're trying to do that now just to tell our story, but we're using that story to recruit. We do have a referral program, as Karen mentioned. If you don't have one, reach out to us. I gladly share the material we have on it. It is the biggest recruiting success that we have. We feel who better to know who wants to work at Amtran than the people who already work at Amtran. They know our culture. They've been through the training. They know the kind of job it is. They know who they want to work with. So that, I would suggest, if you don't have that, please look into it. Some of the things we heard out of our state association that have been a success here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania just last month were testimonials. People were utilizing their frontline staff to tell the story about their service and to tell what kind of place of employment their agencies are, using that as recruitment tools. That's been a pretty good success story, I think, here in the Commonwealth. Sign-on bonuses. Some people are, we see it in the nursing industry, people are, offering sign-on bonuses at certain levels, kind of like the referral programs that we just talked about. The one thing that we are trying here a little bit differently, that we have not tried in the past, is a mentorship or shadowing program. We were contacted by a local agency who, quite frankly, had a young man who was interested. His dream job as a bus driver. So that's pretty cool. We want to make sure we're assisting that. So we're working around that one individual to develop this program, and even going through to shadow and to simulate a job interview. So we think those things can help us, one, to foster this person's desire to fulfill their dream, but two, could help us long-term in a recruitment effort that we utilize these same things. So just for me to wrap up, again, I know it's difficult. You're not alone, but you need to make sure someone in your organization is planning, looking at your process. How can you change? Can you make it more efficient, more attractive? And two, even though we need drivers, and I talked to a counterpart in a different state the other day. They said I could hire 25 drivers tomorrow if they walk through the door. Are they the right 25? You want the person in the bus, but you want the person in the right seat on the bus. These jobs are hard. They're difficult to do. They're not for everybody, but just protect your culture and understand those qualities that you hold dear within your values, and try to make sure you're proclaiming that in your recruitment materials, and you're protecting those things in your onboarding, your hiring process.
Thank you so much, Josh. Yep. And in the chat too, Scott shared Amtran's website from what Josh was talking about at how to join their team. So we'll make sure to share that and check that out. So next we have Julia. She runs, and I know her title now, Executive Director at HERDA, a rural system out in Iowa. So Julia, take it away.
Hi, thanks, Taylor. Okay, so I'm here to talk about some things a little bit differently. I wrote a blog for CTAA a few months ago, and it was talking about returning citizens, which are those re-entering society after incarceration, and how can we help get them employed and also fill the driver shortages that most of us are facing right now. And what do we need to do in order to take a look at what we can do? So at the state level, I met with our Iowa DOT, and they have somebody that is a mobility person that is actually located within at least one of the facilities to help get people their driver's licenses so that they are ready to be more employable once they get released. So it was a good conversation of how then do we not only train them to get a regular driver's license, but how do we do that so that they're prepared in getting maybe a CDL, and so they're ready for employment with, within a transit system as soon as they get released. As we all know, state level changes take some time. So that's not an immediate fix, but it's something we are definitely starting to work on. And we will be forming a statewide committee to bring in the Department of Corrections, Workforce Development, Iowa DOT, and whoever else needs to be at the table. Local levels, you can have a few quicker changes. So we have started a committee. We serve 7 counties, and in one of our counties, we have brought together a committee that has voc rehab, county supervisors, jail diversion, community services, economic development, United Way, the chamber, workforce development, and their diversity director. And this is a committee that we are all going to be sitting down at the table and talking about. We all need something. We all have people that we need to help, and how can we all work together and use the same people to get these solutions solved? Solving it at the local level is a little bit easier than at the state level, but the state level is going to be, we're still going to work on that. So this is also what we're working on. But some immediate changes that I see that we can make, and some changes that HRDA has made themselves that we are having, is in your advertisements, remove things like a background check's going to be done, you're going to be drug tested. Those are roadblocks that allow people to make their own determination if they're going to qualify for those or not. And so many just won't even apply for that. So I want to get them through the door, because once I get them through the door, we can have conversations with them and see if they're a good fit, and then figure out how to hire them and talk about background checks and drug testing and all of that. But if they're not even applying because they think they're already going to be disqualified, we're doing ourselves a disservice. So I would remove all of that type of thing from your advertisements. Karen touched on that, advertise why they want to work for your agency. Flexible hours to spend more time with your family, where this allows you to help other people and still get paid. I don't know. It's going to be different for everybody's agency, but why should they work for you versus going to work for Walmart or Subway or whoever else is paying the same wages that you are? Karen talked about a short application. We have a software that we use for our applications, and it literally tracks for us how many people start an application but never finish it. And once we saw that those numbers were rising, took a look at our application, and I think it's because of the amount of time they were required and all of the fields that they were required to fill out. So we've made ours very short. It's, we want your name, your contact information. There's a spot for you to put your work history, but if you're going to attach a resume, we don't want you to have to do double work. I just want to know who to contact, because I can call you and have a short 5-minute conversation. Not necessarily me, but somebody can call you and have that conversation and say, is this going to be a good fit where we want to have a second interview? And that even a short application and a short 5-minute phone call is still less time than a lot of people take to fill out a complete application that they might never even get, an interview for. So I would consider that. And we have seen more applications come through since I've shortened that application up. And then I think we need to advertise who we want for the job, not the skills that you can teach them, because we can teach you how to drive and how to be safe and how to secure wheelchairs, and we can teach that. But we can't teach you how to be friendly or reliable or patient. Those are things that you either have or you don't have. So, and there are people that have those qualities that would have never even thought that they wanted to drive a vehicle or serve people in the service industry, because they thought you wanted a driver who had experience. And maybe you don't. Maybe you want to teach all of that stuff to somebody, but you want them to have the quality characters that you want for your agency. And then some other things that we can do is simple, review your hiring processes. So how do you determine who you reject from a background check? I know some agencies that if you have anything on your background check, you're just eliminated. Is it 7 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 3 years? Does it depend on the charge? Does it depend on how many charges? Like, what is your process? And if you're using the same process that you were 10 or 15 years ago, you probably should look at that and reevaluate what that looks like. To me, and the wording that's on the piece of paper on the background check It's wording. It doesn't tell the story. It tells you what the charge was. So for example, if there's a drug possession charge, does that mean that they got caught with, 20 pounds of weed? Or does that mean that you were a passenger in a vehicle that got caught with 20 pounds of weed and you're just an innocent bystander? Both are considered drug possession. Both of those offenses you can go to jail for. What's the story behind that? Until we look at people as a whole person and want to know who they are, why they've done what they've done, we're going to miss out on a lot of people that could be very good people to employ. So I would say you really need to kind of take a look at that. Don't judge people by their last poor decision that they've made. We've all made decisions that have not been in our best interest or in the best interest of other people. And if we wear that around for the rest of our lives, and that's the one thing people judge us on, that's not fair. And they would be wrong, because we're good people. All of us here are good people. We've just, some of us made some bad decisions. And then my last thing is that none of us will solve this driver shortage by doing the same things that we've always done. We must think differently. We must change our mindset, and we must try something new. If you take away anything, try one small thing that you could do to change it and see if it's successful. But people changed during this pandemic. We started to have driver shortages before the pandemic, but this pandemic has changed people. It's changed how they want to work. It's changed how they feel about work, how they feel about their communities, how they feel about themselves, their quality of life. It's changed them, and we need to change in order to let them know that there's value in working for our transit systems. So that's what we need to do. And I am continuing to work on this issue nationwide too. Like Scott said, we did work with, we had a town hall with the Association of Workforce Boards, which was really great. I just keep talking about it. We also have a national roundtable of transit systems that are interested in looking at how we can, what people are doing and how we can continue this to hire people that are returning citizens. And so if you are ever interested in joining that roundtable, Taylor, you can put my contact information in there and they can just contact me, because we had one meeting and now people have wanted to have a second meeting, and I assume that we will continue to have those meetings and talk about this. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. And I am throwing that in right now. The next roundtable is in November, so coming up soon. Definitely still plenty of time to register. We definitely encourage, just more discussions on this topic. Well, thank you so much to all of our great speakers. Just as a reminder, this next part is supposed to be very interactive. So I'm going to kick it over to Scott, but just remember, if you ever want to speak or share your point, please just make sure to chat us and I'll be able to unmute you.
Yeah, all you need to do is say in the chat, I have something to say, or the proverbial raised hand, and we'll call on you. We do have somebody that we kind of preceded as the first question, because that's always the hardest one to get. Michael Vieira is with New Jersey Council on Specialized Transportation. He's a local elected official, and he also is someone who has issues. New Jersey and his systems, the county-based paratransits across New Jersey, they all have to do CDLs for 8 passengers. That's the state rule. And Michael had raised this and had some ideas. So Michael, give us kind of your insights on what a solution could look like for you and for the other county-based paratransits in New Jersey.
Hi, Scott, and thank you very much for hosting this meeting. First of all, I just need to say that in New Jersey, we don't have a driver shortage. We have a CDL shortage. I can hire drivers anytime at this point, and I have because of a program that I just put in place. As Scott had said, in New Jersey, we're at a little bit of more of a disadvantage. For our CDLs, it's 8 passengers or more that require CDLs. I'm glad that CTAA was able to convince the feds that, you know what, maybe that wasn't the way to go for the rest of the country. Unfortunately, New Jersey is kind of stuck with it. But what I was able to do through New Jersey Transit just recently, one of the state's programs, they were giving up their transportation program, because that's what's happening. When you can't get CDL drivers, you give up your programs, and it puts a more of a burden on the 21 counties who have to do the senior and disabled transportation. But what I was able to do was, one of the things I was able to do was get 3 non-CDL vehicles. I believe there were 6 passengers or less. And at that point, I was able to hire, without any problem, 3 non-CDL drivers, where I can hire them immediately, put them into these non-CDL vehicles, but in the meantime, also start training them to get their CDL driver license. And at that point, once they get the licenses, I will just keep on replacing those 3 drivers with non-CDL drivers. And that's how I'm doing it. However, again, in New Jersey, there's a big problem with CDLs. For example, I know one of my agencies, they have slots for 45 drivers. At this point, they can only get 23. That's how much of a shortage that we have. And that particular county is not paying too bad. I think they're probably paying $18 an hour. One of the issues that New Jersey also has is the rate on our CDLs. Once we get CDLs, all of a sudden, New Jersey Transit or another agency will come in and hire those CDL drivers away from us at even a higher salary. So, you know, that's our biggest disadvantage. Again, Jersey does not have a driver shortage. It has a CDL shortage. And even it's just not the paratransit industry. All over the news, the school bus industry. And you know what, some of these, and I don't know where it's coming from, they're hiding behind COVID. They're saying that this is happening because of COVID. It's not happening because of COVID. Scott and I were talking about this CDL issue way before COVID was even a daily word off of our lips. It's been an issue for many years, but they're blaming COVID on the shortage of CDL drivers, which I don't really think is the case at all.
COVID took a problem that was already here and made it worse.
And gave it an excuse not to have CDL drivers.
Yeah. So, Michael, is there a way that you can work, because of the shortages of CDL drivers and the impact? Look, the county-based paratransits around New Jersey are transporting the most at-risk and at-need individuals in the state. And I've seen your operations. I've ridden on your vehicles. I know. And if you've got systems that can only make half their trips tomorrow, there's a lot of people that are missing out on getting their groceries and getting to the doctor, and people with disabilities getting to healthcare trips. Is there a way to leverage the seriousness of these trips to some flexibility, and frankly, to use the COVID excuse as on behalf of asking for the flexibility, you know, put that to work for us?
Yeah, I don't know. I know in my particular case, how I was able to do it, because I actually went, you know, I needed to protect my riders and my drivers. So most of my vehicles are 18 passenger vehicles. For the last 18 months, I've been just transporting one-on-one transportation. Now, when you say, hey, how can you actually do that? I was able, through New Jersey Transit, to get a TNC grant, Transportation Networking Companies. So Uber and Lyft has helped me greatly. And you know, that's maybe a way to get around the CDL issue, is using more Uber and Lyft. The problem then becomes, well, what happens if a wheelchair rider needs to use it? And there's the Uber and Lyft, especially in New Jersey, they haven't gotten to the handicapped vehicles yet. I know what I do is we don't turn anybody down. So we would put that person on our system and make sure that that person gets a ride. But we've relied heavily on the TNC services to actually get us through this CDL issue. I'm doing probably 1,500 to 1,800 trips a month just on my my TNC systems, just to help me out because of my shortage of drivers.
Yeah.
You know what? In some of our cases, it's how much we pay our drivers, but the problem is that most of the county either works on grant funding from our casinos, which for years hadn't done very well, or county monies. And you know what? That money is just not there anymore. We're not paying our drivers a lot of money. Are we having trouble with the Amazons and the FedExes? You know what? Not to the extent that I'm hearing around the country, because a lot of those trucks, unless it's a big truck that needs a CDL, they don't need CDLs. So again, my issue in New Jersey is specifically CDL related. And one of the ideas I had was just, could we ask the federal government for a moratorium on CDLs for a little while? My drivers, my non-CDL drivers are trained the same exact way as my CDL drivers. There is no difference on how they act, what type of passengers they take. It just, one has a federal CDL card and one doesn't. That is the only difference. We require all of our drivers to go through all CTAA classes. That's in my contract with my third-party contractor, specifically Community Transportation Association of America. Drivers need to take this class. Dispatchers need to take that class. Our trainings are the same. It's, again, that little piece of paper that says I'm a CDL driver. And I know we had talked about the moratorium
with FTA about flexibility, and they're going to push to FMCSA, who really runs the CDL portion of things. They're eager. I hear regularly about, CTA, what are you doing to help your systems win back ridership? And I've kind of said, well, until they can have fully staffed driver ready rooms, it's going to be hard to win back the ridership pre-COVID. And I'll raise that with them. I think it would be an easier lift, frankly, to get for passenger vehicles, New Jersey to go to the federal standard than for the federal standard to go away. But it's worth a discussion. I mean,
but unfortunately, Scott, in New Jersey, especially, we use kind of the bigger vehicles. So that 12 passenger or more, that doesn't help me out at all because most of my vehicles are 18 passengers.
Right.
And that's that's mostly the 21 counties in New Jersey have the bigger vehicles because, we do a lot of nutrition sites. We do a lot of the food shopping. The smaller vehicles, the medicals, but we can easily put them on the TNCs. Our bigger vehicles we're trying to get as much as we can into the nutrition sites, into the developmental workshops. If we didn't do that, we'd be
with pre-scheduled trips, like a lot of what you're talking about. If we based it not on vehicle capacity, but actual ridership on a vehicle.
That may work.
Yeah. But anyways, Michael, I appreciate it. I think there's a lot of food for thought there. And particularly, I think identifying the CDL piece as the pain point is useful, and we're getting a lot of feedback in the chat and other places from that. So I think there are plenty of people out there, and that gives us some direction. Taylor, were we going to queue up Jeff Hazen now?
Yep, Jeff. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind helping me out, if I promote your wrong one, just let me know. Is this one it? Are you able to unmute? I'm gonna try this one. Okay, I'm gonna try this one. Okay, any of the Jeffs here, can you speak? Okay. Well, Jeff, it might be worth it to just throw your comment to Julia in the chat, and we can make sure to share it with the group. Next, I'm going to. Oh, you got you. Okay, thank you. Please,
there we go.
Please share your comment.
My computer prompted me to hit Alt-A space, so that's what I did. Okay, so you can hear me?
We can.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up on Julia's talking about workforce investment boards. And in case those out there that don't know what those are, they're the ones that are the pipeline with a whole bunch of Department of Labor money that gets sent down to the states and to the different regions of the state. I got excited about Julia's blog post and have been talking with her quite a bit. And so I jumped on it. I met with our sheriff and director of parole and probation last week. And prior to that, I had met with our local workforce investment board staff, and they sent somebody, one of the guys that works for them, to the meeting that we had with the sheriff and director. And it was a great meeting. They were very interested in what we're doing. I got a follow-up email within about 10 minutes after our meeting with the sheriff from Jerry from the Workforce Investment Board, wanting more information, like cost of training and all this stuff. So I'm very encouraged that they're going to be helping us out with this. So I really highly encourage everybody to get a hold of your Workforce Investment Board because they will help you.
Thanks, Jeff. And we agree. And part of what Julia and I know you were in the session in the town hall. Thanks for spending another bit of time with us. The concept is to connect at the local level. That's what I wanted to really create there, because that's where the real solutions are going to happen. And I kind of view like CTA's job is to make that connection and then get everybody out of the way and let you in Oregon, in your case and others here, talk to people directly and work out. Because the point there is we've got to set this up as a career, right? And that's what we're looking for. And that's how you get the long-term kind of buy-in. And you all know, I've seen them over my career, those drivers that, Josh was saying, someone who always wanted to be a bus driver, there's a certain skill set and there's a people orientation to it as well. And you know it when you see it. And those drivers that are going to stick this for the long haul because it really fits. And so, it's creating that career, finding those people. And I think the workforce boards are places that have funding and want to assist in exactly doing this. And interestingly, Jeff, you heard this in the session, they're also very concerned about the labor shortage, cutting weekend and evening service, and places where second and third shift workers, many of the people they're working with, need transit to get to their jobs. So they kind of were approaching us from both those angles.
Yeah, they were very interested in the conversation the other day, and definitely want to get involved.
Great. Well, and appreciate that, and you're kind of underscoring that, because and when the town hall recording's available, we'll get that out to all of our members. But just as importantly, I'm working with the director there to come up with kind of a connecting service, so that if you're not sure who to talk to in your community and our members, they can let me know. I get it right to the right person there, and the connection happens.
Great. Our next topic is one that is super hot here in the chat and the Q&A as it relates to drug and alcohol testing and finding employees. So Gail, I'm going to unmute you next. Get ready. And Gail, you should be live.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Yay. So I thought I heard that Amazon was going to waive the marijuana testing in their drug and alcohol. And I was like, wow, wouldn't that be nice? And not only for here in Colorado Springs, but as a Colorado State delegate, it's really important up in the resort towns. And so curious what you're hearing, or if you have any influence, or what's the discussion?
I'm raising that. I think it is an issue. I don't have to tell everybody here on the political spectrum, the country is pretty divided. But when it comes to legalizing marijuana, the country is not divided. 70% is in favor, and it wins at every in referenda and others. And every time it wins, I cringe because I know what that means to the local transit and how it makes this issue even harder. So, you know, it was so troubling to me that the authorization bill that's sitting in that infrastructure bill that we're hoping the House will approve sometime this month, by the kind of rules that that Senate group created along with the administration, there was to be no policy changes from FAST. And we need policy changes. We need updates to regulatory processes that made sense in the 1990s when the drug and alcohol regs were first kind of promulgated. But a lot has changed since then. And it kind of cut off our ability to have a lot of those discussions. And FTA's typical answer, and I wouldn't answer for them, but I know they tend to say, we have to follow what's in federal law. And they're not gonna move off that. And that usually is a message to me that says, Scott, you, APTA, other people need to get to Congress and change the law or provide the flexibility in that law that you're seeking so that we can then implement it as FTA. I'll raise the issue. There are a number of states that I know this is hindering and making worse a bad problem. And I'll see where we can get, but and we'll definitely make this kind of one of the points of emphasis in the one pager about what we're working on, because as every election cycle tells us, more and more states, New Jersey, and Michael, was just talking, they just recently did this. More and more states are going in this direction. And it's again, cutting us off from a good set of workforce. And I can only imagine like in the ski towns where they have a lot of transit service.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Gail. So the next question that we had, it was a really interesting one that I've never thought about personally. Ben Varner, go ahead and get ready. I'm going to promote you. And if you could talk a little bit about your question about as it relates to housing as an employee benefit, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor. Ben Varner, Sun Valley, Idaho, Mountain Rides Transportation Authority. Good to be coming off the comments from Colorado. We have 5 apartment units in one of our transit facilities that we offer to employees. They're all currently occupied by full-timers. We have been looking at expanding that program. It's my understanding Steamboat, Aspen, I know Jackson Hole has employee dormitory style housing in some apartments, and they've had great success with that. We have trouble because of the way Idaho works with funding. We don't have a statewide mechanism, so we're straight FTA, 5311, 5339 subrecipients. I'm curious, we know, and this is another thing that was COVID accelerated, not necessarily strictly due to COVID, real estate in our market has just gone through the roof, as all resort areas have. $500,000 will get you a basic 3-bedroom house right now. Apartments anywhere in the region are $3,500 a month. We have full-time drivers driving from 2 hours away to come up for work every day. So, from a safety perspective, they're 14 hours behind the wheel, but only 10 hours behind our wheel in a given day. Curious, we've been looking at other funding mechanisms, working with our local housing authority to build more workforce housing for our drivers and other essential employees in the area. What we have found is there's really no pathway with 5339 facilities dollars from our reading that we have found, and we have been told no in the past with other facility buildings that we could not add apartments. We're looking right now at trying to have make a legal argument that housing for transit workers is now, essential for in a transit facility. Short of doing other research or working with Steamboat and those other agencies I mentioned that have had success, I'm curious if the panelists or anybody else have any other good funding ideas as it relates to housing. Have housing stipends helped as a benefit? Our wages are very good and competitive with other service industry wages in our market right now, but we know we need housing, and we needed it 2 years ago, and we know we're 3 to 5 years out from getting anything built or purchased at a minimum. So kind of looking for some groupthink to see if anyone has any solutions or some ideas on all the above. Thank you.
Oh, Ben, that's a really great idea, and that's something that's actionable on our side. It's not something that everybody can a path everyone can go down, but I recall visiting a system in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Fairmont Marion County had employee housing, and this was way 4 or 5 years prior to the pandemic. I think the 5339 concept is interesting. I also think, and I'm going to talk to some people on the House T&I committee, because one of the things in this budget reconciliation piece, that's the other piece beyond the infrastructure bill that's kind of holding everything up. There's $10 billion in that for public transit, and it's all focused around HUD and housing. And I don't think they're necessarily were anticipating it being the kind of housing usage you're talking about. But before if that looks like it's going to move, it'd be nice to get a little bit of flexibility written into that. 10 billion is a big number that perhaps we could get available. And I'll also raise that as a part of 5339, bus and bus facilities. That might be the kind of flexibility we can at least inquire about with FTA, because it's not out of the question when we're talking about bus facilities. These are bus facilities for drivers. I'd like to at least, and I'll get some time to chat with them about that and see where they are on that. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could write up something on what you're doing with that and send it to Taylor and I, first of all, make a great blog piece, but it's something that I think not a lot of systems are thinking about, and some outside of resort areas may be able to benefit from. So I really appreciate that concept that you raised.
Scott, thank you. And Taylor, thank you all. I'll get something to you within the week showing what we do now and then some of the challenges we face as well. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. We had a housing expert speak at the luncheon at our Sun conference in Missoula, and there it was all about access to lower income housing, and I'm now kind of hitting myself because that would have been a great thing to talk to her about, and I bet you she would have been all over similar stuff. So good idea.
Thank you so
Ben.
much.
And Ben too, I dropped Scott and I's emails in the chat, just so you know. So really look forward to that. It's such a really incredible idea. Next, I'm going to ask Jim Moulton to promote. Jim also has been experiencing a lot of struggles, and he's really looking for advice from Julia, and we might have accidentally lost Josh, but I'll let Jim actually go ahead and say what he wanted to say.
Thanks, Taylor. I guess I just wanted to say that, between Karen and Julia and Josh, there were a lot of ideas thrown out there. I counted 20 plus, wrote down as many as I could on top of Karen's top 10 list already. But, I went through them also, and we're probably doing, 15 of them already, and we are really, really struggling. We're in Vermont, so I know one of our issues is that we have an aging workforce more so than a lot of other states. So we are seeing people who are retiring, and that is an element of COVID. The mentality that people got about reevaluating life and why am I still working and whatnot. But it's made it a much more challenging environment to hire in. And we, despite doing I say 15 of these 20 different ideas, we are still losing drivers faster than we can replace them. We've got $1,000 signing bonus. We have the employee referral program. We have a starting wage that we're not even using anymore. We're throwing, $3 extra at people and we cannot hire, and it's happening around the state. And, all those things that everybody else has said in terms of inability to keep service on the road. And, so like everybody here, I came thinking, maybe we'll hear some tidbits that will help. And I'm not saying that's not the case, but at the same time, it's a little discouraging when I look at it and say, we have been, as creative as we can possibly be, and are doing, what seems to be what everybody else is doing, and we are still struggling. So I'm curious, in particular, if Julia and Josh are actually seeing success with the things you're doing, and if you can point to any one particular thing or two particular things which you could say, these really seem to be the ones that make the biggest difference. Thanks.
I can tell you that a few of the things that have been successful for us in getting more people that we can actually talk to and learn, even if we want to hire them, and that has been changing the job ad to literally remove anything that says we're going to check a background or do a drug test. But also when something comes back on their background check, that we don't just automatically dismiss them. We have another conversation with them about, what they need to do if they want to, work for us, or, we try to put in more effort in trying to hire people than denying people jobs, because we just don't have that luxury anymore. But so we really do try to work with the whole person, and we have found we're having some success. We're not successful in every one of our communities. And every one of our communities is different. But another thing that we have also found success in is that we have what we call floater drivers. So they don't work specific shifts, but they are in a specific shift or a specific area, but we literally have them floating around and doing all of these jobs for other drivers where we need to fill positions. And those have seemed to be positions that more people want. And I don't really know why. I don't know if it's the variety or whatever, but those are the positions we're having more success filling.
Okay.
Josh, how about you or Karen? We know there's no magic bullet that just do this and it will all fix, but Jim's in a relatively rural part of the country, and I know that can make it a little more challenging. An aging probably population. Any suggestions?
Scott, I would say we haven't really experienced the issue of getting candidates. So I know that might not be a great popular answer here. Ours has come in the process of moving the hiring, the pre-employment process forward as efficiently as possible while still maintaining regulations we have to do. Our focus has moved forward to how can we make these jobs as attractive long-term. Like I mentioned, our drivers come in at a part-time level only. That's CBA negotiated. So how can we make that, only knowing your schedule at 1 o'clock today for tomorrow? How can we adjust that? Looking at, we've mentioned here many times, the work-life balance. People are leaning more towards split shifts for us. So how can we look at our run cuts that we can adjust to have more split shifts? There's also a CBA element to that too. What I would say for, because I've been on the paratransit side with the shared ride paratransit provider here in Blair County. That's where I got my start in the transit industry. And now we do the fixed route here in the area. I would just exhaust every option. Your area better than anybody. Your senior centers, your churches, grocery stores. The people you want to attract. Where those people go. Something as simple as putting a flyer in a church window or a rec center or a grocery store where those type of individuals congregate. also, and you know, to tell them the true story about what the job is. We've mentioned that many times. Julia and Karen have done it. What actually a driver in your service does. It's not just, you know, turning the wheel and pushing the gas pedal. It's really, you know, people buy into it. I saw a comment in the chat about, you know, money isn't the biggest driver. Obviously, it's great to have a competitive wage, and we're lucky to have that here in Altoona. But if you can get people to understand the benefit they're providing to their community through that service, people are going to want to work there. They're going to want to work there long term, I think. So, like you said, Scott, no magic bullet. A lot of things Julia has mentioned are great examples as well. I would just really get down to the grassroots level and just try to tell your story. I think that's probably the biggest recruitment you can get in those areas.
I will
One
add.
other thing is, I think when we're used to having older drivers, we tend to want to recruit older drivers, and we need to try to look at how do we get younger people also interested in transit and make them transit geeks and nerds and wanting to be bus drivers and that type of thing. So we have to kind of look at who else we are talking about the benefits of being a bus driver too. And that's not just going to be the older people, that is also going to be these younger people coming up. And I think some of the things that is offered is like, especially flexibility and some of that, that's really appealing to some of the younger folks. So I would suggest kind of changing that mindset as well and going after people that aren't just elderly.
That's a great point, because some of that may have changed in your policies. Some of our, like our insurance provider, you know, for our maintenance staff, we had to go through and kind of adjust what we accept age level, you know, with certain movement of the vehicle. So that takes a policy change. You're right. We can't keep replacing 55, 60-year-old people with 55, 60-year-old people. This is not going to work anymore. So, there's also things contractually you might have to have some difficult conversations about changing CBAs, if that applies to you. And for us, that's what we're working through right now, is that long-term approach of how can we make these jobs more attractive. The issue we're running into there is just an old perspective of, well, if I had to do it, someone else should have to do it too. And we're trying to work through, look, I get you took 10 years to get full-time. That's not what we want anymore. You didn't like it. We don't like it. How can we make this a better environment long-term for people to work at? So a great example Julie brought up, and some of those things I understand that might not change overnight. You might have some policy changes or some insurance changes that go along with it.
You know, I remember a member of ours in Alabama I was visiting, and he, and this is way before this was an issue, he kept a really great working relationship with all the volunteer fire departments in his area. And when firefighters couldn't, he would hire them immediately. And that was like, it was like a stocking pool for his drivers. And he found that they already knew CPR, they knew every road and hill in the county. And you know, I wonder, we should reconnect and ask, hey, is that still viable? That was one of his solutions that he worked with. I know a lot of CTAA members operate in and around colleges and college towns. And I think that's also a place where I've met many transit managers who began in the business in their college town as bus drivers. And you know, I agree with Julia. Look how when you see a national ad placement for Uber, what are they selling when they're trying to recruit drivers? Make your own schedule, be your own boss, flexibility. They're selling that and not the money. And there's something there for us to kind of crunch on too.
I would say, Jim, my top 3 things that I've been hearing recently is some agencies, and Josh actually, when Josh and I talked about this a couple months ago, it was very key that they feature about safety. And they redid one of their ads around COVID and mask wearing. I know each part of the country and different things, but in talking about that, he realized how critical it was to some people not applying because it was assumed nationally, a lot's been said about it, but he didn't feel it was penetrating the way it needed to. And so he authentically looked at that again and went right out and changed that. Josh might want to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. One of the selling things is people could just be scared to work in our type of industry just because of the pandemic. But everyone on this call has put these PPE measures, and they're not going to go away. I mean, you're cleaning more than you ever have. You're protecting drivers and customers. So that is something. When Karen and I had that conversation a few years ago, it was just kind of like we try to do a video per year in house. It's not going to win an Emmy. We understand that, but we need to show what we're doing here through our staff and how safe and clean everyone is here, whether it's in our facilities or on board our vehicles. So yeah, I think it's another recruitment tool that you could use. I mean, it's kind of a public service announcement for us, but it could be used as an recruitment tool too. Thank you, Karen.
One other thing I'll say on the Indeed.com part, for those of you who've used it a lot, I always say start with the free service if you haven't, but always start there. When it comes to paying for something like that, ask for a specialist who is assigned to you and will spend time. I've used this, spent time and went through who's hovering, what are they looking at, what are they opening, what are they not opening. And sometimes it makes you change everything about your advertising in ways where they're telling you, move this part of what you're describing to the top. That's what people are searching for in transit across the nation, or I've seen it hovering over your area. So a lot of placement, words that are being used and things like that, they will give you the feedback, but you have to ask them. They're not going to volunteer it for you, even though they're supposed to, and that's part of what you're paying for, not just literally what jobs I'm seeing. So be aggressive in that with them. I'm paying you money for this. It's, yes, trying to move my ad to the top, but even if you are not of enough of a volume, you can make those kind of changes, quickly like that yourself, go in and change it, but have that kind of analysis coming back to you so you can keep updating and changing your advertising. The last thing is, for some of you, when we're talking about routes and schedules and what's right for your particular service in your area, does it mean I have to look at that again? Most of you would say today, if I was starting my transit agency today, we would not be doing things at all the way we do with our routes or our service. And that's understandable. But in the meantime, are there some things we freshly have to look at in terms of what is attracting and who's applying to us, and the hard work that goes into that, and asking your dispatchers and your drivers, of course, what their feedback is around that, and incorporating that into some of your considerations would be the top three I've heard.
Thank you. That was great. And thank you, Jim, for starting that lively discussion. I want to make sure we get in, we might have time for one or two more, but I really want to make sure we get Renee in because her comment ties into something that I know Scott is working with FTA and Congress on. So Renee, get ready. You have two, so I'm just going to guess. Does this one work, Renee? All right, what about this one? Are you able to unmute? Okay, well, just in case Renee can't, she wanted to chat about adjusting the local match. So more specifically, let me just pull up her question. Renee stated, can we ask the federal government to decrease local match requirements for operation with formula grants? Instead of 50-50, can we ask for 70-30? Our budgets are already tight and we cannot compete with the rising wages. So Scott, I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, no, Renee's in Wyoming, and her senator was supportive of the concept that we had, and Taylor and I both worked on it. We had a bill on the floor. We had it worked into the concepts that we're moving, and then they blocked everything. And the concept was, under certain conditions, to equalize for rural operations the local share, so it was the same for capital and operating, which is a challenge. I mean, look, it will increase spend down and other issues, so it's not perfect, but I do agree, particularly for a lot of the rural operators, it would help, and that flexibility. That's exactly what we've been trying to get. For the urban operators, not possible. You're getting your operating dollars through the fare box. You're getting it through local taxes, and a lot of other sources that are a lot tougher to kind of universally change with one set of language like it is for rurals. But I think the point is we need operating flexibility. And I'll continue, you can rest assured, Renee, we're going to continue to push for that. We think it's important, particularly for communities that, like many in Wyoming, are really serving a disparate population. So long trips and also predominance of passengers and basically older adults, low income. There's certain categories that I think fit where we've had both Republicans and Democrats supportive of that change. I kind of feel like that's not if, it's when we'll get it, and it's just we've got to find the right timing to nail that down.
Thank you. So I think we'll do one more. This topic came from Alex Clifford and Randy about how to make the positions more attractive and advice to pull in more people, but be honest about what the job is, but also the realities of the job. So Randy, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Are you able to unmute and kind of chat more about what you were talking about?
Yes, actually, I saw Alex's, and I certainly understand what he was saying. Because we battle the same thing. In fact, we're housed in the same building as solid waste. And until recently, solid waste workers made more than bus drivers. And we've corrected that. But I mean, I've been here almost 11 years, and it's been that way the whole time. So, but anyway, my question really had to do with part-timers, and particularly Josh talked about people becoming part-timers. But we have part-time positions. You know, we have a big vacancies in full-time positions, but we also have part-time positions that are, you know, we may have 15 positions, but we only have 2 or 3 people working. And we just we're looking ways to use those more effectively, the ones that we have, but also how to recruit those better. So that was my main question. And just to top that off, you know, we're non-union, we're a city employed, everything's city employed, so we don't have a lot of restrictions other than what our city places on us in terms of how we do things.
So Julia, Josh, or Karen, do you guys have any ideas?
Randy, I would just ask you a question. I mean, when you're doing your recruitment process and you're getting feedback from potential or prospective candidates, are you hearing any kind of consistent reason why they're not going through the process, whether it's flexibility of hours, any kind of limited benefits you can provide even to part-time folks?
We're actually adding some benefits to part-timers, which before they were called intermittent. And in fact, the idea was that we would try to work around their schedules. The problem was that wasn't working because their schedules never matched with ours. And an example, one time talking to operators at one of my get-togethers with them, one guy tells me, he drives a school bus, so he needs to work after 4:30. So we purposely, from that conversation, created schedules that started so he could come to work, but he didn't want to work past 8:30. So it didn't do any good when we have service till 10:30. So it's that type of thing. But so we've done that. But no, we're just not getting applicants. We also just moved some of the paratransit operators that are driving cutaways. Thankfully, it didn't change. We've moved those from CDL positions to non-CDL positions. That is helping, but we're getting applicants for those non-CDL drivers. We're still, even though we're offering sign-on bonuses, we've increased our wage rate to very much a marketable rate. The applications are coming in very slowly. But so I appreciate all the information y'all shared. It's been helpful. There's a number of those things we're not doing, and particularly just some of those things that will make it easier for people to apply, not hinder that.
Hey, Randy, I had a member of our board runs a system in Loudoun County, Virginia, and he and Karen work closely together, Bruce Sims, and Karen was giving him advice, and he went and he changed a lot of things, his recruiting and his sourcing. he started to talk differently about the job and all this. And for 2 or 3 months, nothing. And then he said, all of a sudden he called me, he said, it hit. Finally, they're all starting to come in. And I kind of feel like the changes that we need to make, it's kind of like when we launch new service. We can't judge it by the first week's ridership. We got to let these things kind of percolate in the community for a while and understand that we're in a competitive environment and stick to it. So as you implement some of these changes, give them time to kind of take root before you decide, yeah, that didn't work. Bruce was like, I was so frustrated. I'm not hearing anything. I did all these changes. I got nothing. And then a switch flipped.
So one thing that we've done, and I'll just throw it out there. Our community college had a truck driving school, and we talked to them before, but we actually now have them offering a CDLB driving course, and it's super. I was wondering why it was going to cost us to provide some tuition assistance. It's super. The tuition is, they can get their whole license and everything at least before whatever you might change. They could get that all for just about $500. So that's not. But we're actually also hiring trainees. This will be for their second class. We're gonna hire them as trainees and pay them to go through that class to get their CDLs. And we've never had that capacity before. We've always required a CDL, and then we would help them get their endorsements.
Scott, I was just going to say one thing. One of the things that we did was go around and talk to, our other staff, like what ideas could you come up with? Because, we can only think of so many things. And one of the ideas, which we have not implemented yet, but I think it's a brilliant idea, is they wanted us to hold a job fair inside one of our buses. So go park the bus somewhere, that's sort of centrally located in wherever community that we want, and then invite people to come to the bus and talk to the driver and, hand out applications and talk about the job and do some of that kind of stuff. And I thought that was kind of creative. So it's something we probably will be doing at some point in time, not during the winter here in Iowa by any means, but, I think getting some feedback from your other staff too, that may not necessarily be involved in any of the hiring processes, but they all have ideas. And when they see something like that come to play, then they get really excited about it too, because they knew they were part of something bigger.
Thanks, Julia. And I'm cognizant we've taken up 90 minutes of people's time, and I want to kind of close the session, but I do want to close recognizing, I think Alex dropped a really important question in the Q&A that CTA, Alex, we're gonna run with this, which is the basic. Yes, I agree with Alex. There's a paradigm shift happening in the labor market, and it was coming. I think it got kind of put on steroids by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it was probably coming before that. And the question he posed, which is a really good one, how do we make this job more appealing? And we're gonna use that and try to talk to members and try to answer that question more thoroughly, and try to source a lot of our 1,000 operating members out there around the country who may have come up with some really good ideas on that we can share. So the long answer and short answer is the answer to that question, which I agree is a good groupthink challenge. We're going to work on that and get something back to everybody. So with that, thank you for sticking with us for a long webinar, but it's a critical topic. We're not done with this here. We've got a lot more to do. I'm so glad Karen could join because she has a lot of expertise. Use it. Julia and Josh, it's great to hear from those of us who work inside the Beltway. You guys are doing it in the field, and nothing's more important than that work. So thank you so much for giving us so much of your time. And Julia, I guess next Thursday we'll be appearing somewhere else. We'll figure that out later. But have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thanks for joining us, and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you all.